Don Hernán, mira, las coincidencias son así. Este es el escenario donde grabé el primer episodio de 10 AM. Es el mismo escenario, estoy sentado en el mismo sitio.
¿La verdad?
¿Sí?
Y este es el episodio número 100.
El número 100.
O sea, ¿vos sabes cuántos podcasts llegan al episodio número 100?
Muy poquititos.
Y yo te dije que quería hacer un episodio, pues para mí una de las personas donde yo te digo, donde más he aprendido. Entonces, pues invitamos a Joe McCann, pues está como a 3-4 minutos de que se conecte. Es un episodio que es en inglés, no lo vamos a traducir, pero también nos parece bacano, pues porque tenemos un gran porcentaje de la población que nos dicen, hey, el alfa en cualquier formato, porque alfa es alfa. Y yo te he dicho, Darío, pues que para mí una de las personas que tiene, digamos que el mejor filtro de ruido contra señal es este man. Y yo he aprendido una cantidad. Entonces yo le escribí, pues yo te conté que estuve
hace con él en Portland, ¿no?
Sí, fui lo visité en su oficina en Portland y pues hemos empezado a hacer cosas juntos pero me parece súper interesante porque de verdad te digo que he aprendido demasiado. Entonces, siempre se trata de cuidar una buena dieta de información y yo creo que es fundamental. Y no
solo eso,
nosotros lo tuvimos, creo que hace 11 meses.
Casi un año. Va a estar muy cerquita de un año, porque recuerdo que estábamos en Europa y recién yo había aterrizado en Europa hace junio 25, 26.
Estábamos en Girona.
Así es, estábamos en Girona. Ahí solo como para recomendar a la gente, pues ya YouTube te permite hacer los subtítulos, la traducción pues en español.
Echar a los captions, sí.
No es perfecto, pero es muy bueno. Y un mensaje para los que nos escuchan en Spotify, no es que no queramos responder los comentarios, sino que desde Spotify no se pueden responder los comentarios. Entonces, si nos quieren escribir, lo pueden hacer por Twitter o lo pueden hacer por YouTube. En Spotify no podemos responder.
Mientras, porque este episodio no va a ser como el background, entonces yo voy a dar una pequeña radiografía, porque qué pereza volverle a preguntar. Una de las cosas que yo creo que a toda la gente que hace podcast es que le pregunte como esa biografía que le ha dicho 20,000 veces, pero básicamente este man lleva 25 años trabajando en tech y uno de los componentes que más me gusta a mí, bueno, son realmente 3 cosas y lo van a ver pues en la entrevista. Bueno, primero es que el tipo entiende código. Segundo, pues que ha sido un trader, pues quant trader toda la vida. Y tercero, yo se lo oí en un podcast y no lo había entendido. No, es que yo organizaba fiestas y raves y no sé qué cosas, y usted lo ve y es lleno de tatuajes. Entonces es un tipo que para mí en inglés se dice a well-rounded investor, es un tipo que está muy, o sea, entiende también el elemento, tiene el elemento de la cultura. Entonces la matemática, el código y la cultura. Es muy difícil encontrar un inversionista que tenga, digamos, que estas 3 dimensiones. Y por eso es que nos enseña y le aprendemos tanto. Entonces, cuando él habla de Solana, no habla Solana desde simplemente una función de price action, que lo podría hacer así, pues porque simplemente llega y dice, no, el gráfico, el análisis técnico me está diciendo que vamos a llegar a la vela va a tocar de promedio móvil de 200 días y él es capaz de dar esa explicación. A mí lo que me gusta es que se va al repositorio y me puede explicar qué es un validador, qué significa el impacto de esto, cuáles son los TPS. Entonces, eso es uno de los componentes que me parece tan importante. La otra cosa que yo le he aprendido a Millón es ese outlook macro, porque macro es más es un ejercicio de entender matemáticas y esta mañana pues lo hablábamos pues con Arias, que nos daba una visión muy macro pues, del mundo y del país, pero que te da una definición de macro con un poquito del análisis de psicología. Te dice, hey, mira, que estén publicando esto no quiere decir que usted tengas que leer todo ese párrafo, simplemente tenés que leer estas 4 palabras que hay acá. Entonces él, por ejemplo, y yo creo que arranco con eso y me dice, es que lo que había que entender es, por ejemplo, Janet Yellen sentándose en Shanghái diciendo, o sea, haciendo un acuerdo de política monetaria tácita que no se ve pues como en la prensa, donde dicen, hey, a este sistema le tenemos que inyectar más, pero estamos en plena campaña política. Entonces otras son las dimensiones. Y eso es una de las cosas que vuelvo y digo, yo creo que el ejercicio más importante que estamos haciendo es tener este tiempo para uno poder digerir eso. Yo he sido muy crítico, por ejemplo, de la información que consume la gente. A mí me pasan artículos, vuelvo y te digo, no estoy menospreciando, pero de alguna forma, pues, parecería que sí. Pero cuando vos te pasan el artículo de alguien que te habla sobre Bitcoin, que no lo ha estudiado 100 horas y está portafolio, La República, pues entonces está recibiendo información de quién. A mí me gusta de Joe, que Joe McCann, las datos de Joe es Chris Dixon, es Anatoly, o sea, es un montón de cracks que le creen porque tiene un conocimiento que sabe filtrar. La otra cosa, pues, es que tienen una disciplina de trabajo, Darío. Yo creo que este man, la señora lo debió haber regañado en algún momento porque ese man vive pegado en Twitter y en Telegram y manda mucho alfa. Luego les compartimos el Twitter y toda la cosa. Y manda mucho alfa, pero yo creo que en algún momento los llamaron la atención y le dijeron, oye, hermano, usted no puede seguir pues conversando tanto porque a qué horas creo que tiene creo que tiene 1 o 2 recién nacidos y entonces pues se le puede complicar la cosa. Entonces, pues eso era como el abrebocas, que si vamos a entrar de una vez va a ser en materia. A mí yo le comparto aquí el link al hombre que de pronto nos entra un par de minuticos pues tarde.
No hay problema.
Y si no nos toca...
No hay problema.
Sí, y si no nos toca...
el hombre está analizando sus últimas cosas.
No.
De hecho, ayer tuiteó una cosa muy extraña. Estuvimos ahí debatiendo en el chat muchos ratos y sí,
ahorita le preguntamos a ver qué nos dice, si sí o si no, pero pues vuelvo y te digo, análisis técnico, macro, cultura, código. Conseguirme pues un inversionista que entienda de estas 4 cosas.
Sí, no. A mí debo confesar que a mí me ha empezado a pasar algo curioso y es, uno va recibiendo información, o sea, uno sí tiene que tener la disciplina y la exigencia de empezar a escuchar este tipo de contenido o leer este tipo de contenido y al principio uno está muy perdido, muy perdido. Y yo no sé qué empieza a pasar en el cerebro y empieza a relacionar y a conectar y a medida que uno va profundizando y va entendiendo, la verdad es que el consumo de contenido le cambia diametralmente. O sea, es impresionante y es impresionante como a la vez el cerebro, no sé, se vuelve absolutamente distinto. Es como cuando uno empieza a comer bien y de pronto le tira uno al cuerpo no sé, un perro caliente, todo grasoso, y uno medio se lo come, pero le cae malísimo, ya no le gusta, o si dejó de tomar Coca-Cola, ya tomar una Coca-Cola le sabe como a una cosa rarísima, no sé, eso es súper raro, pero ojalá la gente empezara a administrar mejor el contenido que consume. Yo no estoy diciendo que tengan que escucharnos a nosotros, pero sí vale la pena cambiar ese tipo de consumo. Entró Joe.
Joe, you're punctual as an English lord, man.
Hey. Hola, buenos días.
Eso. Muy bien, Joe.
That's the way to do it, man. That's the way to do it. And we're giving you a little bit of sightseeing of the city you actually used to live in Medellin, which we definitely want you to see you here back.
Man, I can't wait to get back there. Honestly, I love it down there.
Your youngest child is months or
yeah, a year and a half.
Okay, we definitely need to schedule, because I'm making a bet that I'm definitely seeing you at least twice this year, at least twice.
You'll see me in Singapore for sure.
I'll see you in Singapore. All right, Joe. So the good thing about doing a second podcast is that we don't have to go through the brief biography, because you've done that a ton. By the way, your exposure to podcasts, it is as if you actually had your own podcast, because you've been appearing at least once or twice.
Dude, I just did 2 yesterday too. Like, this is my 3rd one in 2 days.
And do you not get tired of repeating the same stuff? So I was trying to think, like, what do we ask him that is not the same? Because if not, it's like repetition mode, and you also get bored, right?
No, it's because this is the way that I can actually market my fund. This is like the only like legal way I can really do it. So it doesn't matter if I have to repeat myself 10 times, because it's always reaching a different audience.
Yeah, it always reaches a different audience. And let me talk about audience, because I think in your forecast and what you can predict, you do not know that you actually have such a tremendous Latin audience. Because let me tell you a quick story. So remember that event that I invited you to do like a small speech in March? So I act as the moderator, and then once I'm off of the stage, a young girl catches me. I'm like, hey, Hernan, I wanted to ask you something. Like, yeah, tell me. Look, my uncle, he has 100 cows, and he just sold 10, and he bought them because he liked the advice or the things, which is not advice, but the things you said about Solana. And then they were reinforced because he heard the podcast with Joe McCann. So the question to me was, should I sell them the other 90 cows that I have and just stake them on Solana? So imagine the impact that you're having, Joe. This is a 19-year-old girl in Colombia asking me if they should sell the rest of their 90 cows to buy Solana. And a cow is like, I don't know, $500, $800 each. So that because they think that the business of staking Solana is better than the ongoing business with cows. So imagine the dimension of that.
That's wild. Yeah.
That is.
I mean, I'm changing lives every day. What can I say?
That is pretty a wild story. But let's just focus talking. Let's start, because in the past interviews we just talked about yourself, but we haven't talked strictly about Asymmetric, the fund. Because I recently learned that you were rated as the #1, and this is something that you did not know about, but you rated the #1 fund in the world. Explain a little bit, how did that happen? What does it mean? What does it entail? Because I've been bragging to all my friends. See, I told you guys, you should have invested in Joe's fund. In fact, a few of my friends have already connected with you, and they are part of the LPs. But how did this happen, and why did it happen?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, it was brought to us by the company that tracks hedge fund performance. Like, we weren't tracking this. So there's a company called Preqin that is kind of like a marketplace where, you know, they provide, on the one side of the market, you know, hedge funds, venture capital funds, et cetera. They post their performance for their funds to Preqin. And then on the other side, you have like investors and allocators that are looking to invest in fund managers, and they can filter them by, like what the strategy is, performance, you know, AUM, those types of things. And Preqin reached out to us and said, hey, congratulations, you guys, for the trailing 12 months. So basically from March of 2023 through the end of, or I should say April 1st, 2023 through the end of March 2024. So those 12 months, they said you're the #1 performing hedge fund across any asset class. So this isn't even just crypto.
So compared to any other, aside crypto, wow.
Anything. So trading stocks, bonds, credit, you know, arbitrage, you name it, anything. And clearly I was shocked and also really excited. Who doesn't want to be #1, right? But it wasn't like a goal of ours. We're just doing what we do at Asymmetric, and we ended up becoming #1. And we won't stay there, right? Like, I mean, every month there's gyrations in the market that are going to affect, you know, the performance of any fund, and some funds are going to outperform others, et cetera, et cetera. But to know that, and, you know, 2013 wasn't like the easiest year. It wasn't like 2022.
Yeah,
but
it got good at the end of the year, but at the beginning it was just bad.
That's right. And so, you know, we feel really, really proud about that. The team at Asymmetric has been really working extra hard from day one, and the reality is that we haven't changed anything, right? Like, we're still just executing against our strategy. Whether we remain #1 doesn't really matter to us. What matters is, you know, managing risk in a very volatile environment, as well as generating returns for our limited partners, or, you know, our investors. And so we're not doing anything strategically different. We're not doing anything tactically different. It's exactly the same thing. And I think the performance drivers were stuff that I've talked about in the past. One is we trade a lot of options and derivatives. Volatility continues to be what we see as wildly mispriced in the Bitcoin, or I would say the crypto markets in general. And then on the other hand, you know, we were the first fund to invest in meme coins, particularly Bonk. And excuse me, there's no doubt that was a large performance driver. But, you know, look, we've also been very early to Solana. We bought the bottom when it was like $8-9. and basically managing risk around those positions. So that's how I think how we ended up there. I spoke with, actually, I was in New York last week at the Coinbase Institutional Conference, and I ran into a guy who runs a fund of funds. So he invests in his fund invests in fund managers. And he said, Joe, he's like, it's amazing. You guys have actually been able to break away, and really outperform, raise a lot of money, et cetera. Whereas, like he said, a lot of the guys that we invested in as fund managers, they're kind of stuck. And being stuck means like they bought into the DeFi narrative, all the Ethereum stuff, and it's not going anywhere. And like, that is unfortunate, because what that suggests to me is you've got folks that, I like to say, over intellectualize their investments in their portfolio. When in reality, if you're running a hedge fund, your job is to make your LPs money. So that's what we focus on.
That's probably one of the best definitions. And before we started, I was actually I was doing with Dario kind of like a quick introduction in Spanish to try to explain to the audience why we were doing, this is our episode 100. And for us, the episode 100 is pretty significant, because not a lot of podcasts make it to episode 100. But I told Dario, look, man, the reason I wanted Joe to be in this episode is because from all the information that I consume, and I consume probably, Joe, I don't know, between 1,500 and 1,800 hours of information, you're the best filter of noise to signal. And to me, that is very important. And I was trying to explain in a less technical term that what means to Dario. And I basically told him the following. I think Joe is probably the best, most rounded off investor, because you have 4 things that are very important. The first one is, well, you are a tech guy. You were the CEO of a Node.js company. And so that is very important, because whenever you're investing, you actually understand the code. So to me, that is just strictly, it gives you an edge, understanding the code. Knowing the difference of like Ethereum being coded in Solidity and Solana being coded in Rust, that is important, because that gives you the advantage. The second element is, well, you understand macro, because macro, the biggest hit that I had in my personal investments in 2021 is that I did not know how to read macro, but you actually know that there's a bunch of words that you can filter out, and those are the ones that are significant. The third is that you actually, and this is something that I grabbed from listening to a podcast, is that you actually get culture. And so understanding culture is fundamental, because it gives you a flow of where human behavior is going. So it makes you a better investor. And the fourth one is, well, you're actually great at charting and technical analysis. So I was asking Dario, please find me a guy that actually understands those 4 elements. And that's why I actually wanted to have the podcast with you. And I have like a couple of 4 or 5 questions that basically allow you to show off the knowledge that you have in those realms. And so
Great.
the first one that I wanted to ask you is, like, explain to us, why is it that we think, or we're reading, or even believing that the Bitcoin price is suppressed? Is it because people are doing they're shorting the futures to selling at the spot, or is it just miners selling back the shock from the inventory of the halving? Because you could go to Wall Street, ask that question, but no one will give you an answer, because they do not understand those 4 elements that I just described.
Yeah. First of all, thank you. I am flattered for the breakdown of my kind of spectrum of skills. But you're right. I mean, the reality is, I just like to pursue things that I'm interested in. And I've always been interested in emerging technology. I've always been interested in the financial plumbing of the global financial system. I've always been, interested in trading and technical analysis. And, I've been a part of pop culture and entertainment for a long time. I used to DJ. I've had record labels. I've had a fashion line with my brother, who's a fashion designer. Like, had a pulse on this kind of stuff. And so it is a unique, rare combination of really kind of like technical, boring macro stuff, and then like DJ at a club. It's very
who
rare,
knew
right?
that would actually pay off to be the number 1 hedge fund in the world, right?
Exactly, right. And so so look, to get to your question, why is the price of Bitcoin being suppressed? So anytime, I think it's very natural for human beings to look at the value of something and want to figure out why it is worth what it is saying it is. The reality is that the price of Bitcoin, as we sit here today, is determined by whether there are more buyers or sellers. That's it. That is it. It is natural for human beings to want to understand why. We are curious creatures. It is why we are the top of the food chain, right? We are intelligent enough to try to reason through things. And so, sure, you could look at a number of things that could be affecting price. So number one, let's take massive short interest on CME futures for being short Bitcoin. And people say, well, like, man, people are shorting the heck out of Bitcoin. What's going on? Well, those folks are capturing what's called a basis trade, where they short the future and they're long the underlying, but the underlying are the ETFs. And so they do some fancy math there to be long the ETF and short the future and capture the basis. And Wall Street loves these trades because Wall Street doesn't need to make 100% a year like crypto, right? They need to make 8, 12%. And if they can get, 1 to 2% a month in P&L, they're heroes, right? So on the one hand, yes, there's a lot of open interest on the short side for CME futures that could be potentially suppressing price. But I think more importantly there is that what was a strong signal the first few months of this year with the ETF inflows and outflows, but particularly inflows, there's no more signal there anymore. Because when somebody puts on this basis trade, they're going to buy, there's going to be flows in, they're buying the ETF and they short the future. Well, when they unwind that trade, they cover their short by buying back the future and then they sell the ETF. So there's no more signal anymore for the most part in these flows, as long as these basis trades of massive size are going to be continuing to get put on. That's one aspect. I think the other aspect is you have seasonality. Q2 historically is the worst performing quarter for Bitcoin, period. And we're seeing that again on a relative basis to Q1. Q1, it was up an enormous amount, and we've basically traded like sideways to lower to slightly higher. What are we, 10, 11 weeks into the quarter? Makes sense from a seasonal perspective. Furthermore, you have incredibly low spot volumes. So what does that suggest? Well, typically when you don't have a lot of spot volume, or even derivatives volume for that matter, but let's just focus on spot, you have what's called a buyer's strike. And what happens is the price goes lower. So a buyer's strike is when, buyers are they're on strike. They're not actually, out there bidding the market. None of this stuff actually matters. What actually matters is what the price is. And the price is reflective of whether or not there are more buyers and sellers. I heard today, over the past couple of days, that there's a large miner out of China that did 100,000 Bitcoin OTC deal. I don't know if this is true or not. I just heard this from traders in the industry, and that's a pretty big piece of Bitcoin, money, right? That's a lot of Bitcoin. But evidently they did it as an OTC deal with a 10% discount to spot when it was trading at $70,000. So in theory, the price shouldn't go below 63,000 because then they would lose money, right? I don't even know if that's true, and it doesn't matter, because what matters is the price. And so, what is suppressing the price of Bitcoin? I mean, we're like 10, 11, 12% off all-time highs. I don't know. That's not that bad. It's not 50% off the highs, right? And so I do think that that the second half of the year, and I've been saying this for a while, like Q1, my view was always it was going to be a ripper, and it was. Q2, I was concerned that it would be kind of sideways, choppy, which it has been. And then Q3, I think we actually should see a turnaround, particularly in altcoins. I could be wrong, but global liquidity tends to pick up in the summer. And then in Q4, we have an election here in the United States where risk assets tend to get juiced. So our view still remains the same, that we think that, the second half of the year should be pretty good for risk assets. Hopefully crypto is involved in that.
So during this play of gaining a little bit of the premium, doing the short, because one of the words that I actually paid the most attention, and by the way, Dario, we have to share the newsletter and his Telegram, but whenever you say gamma squeeze, I go back and is gamma squeeze happening? What needs to happen so that we may have a gamma squeeze on Bitcoin?
Yeah, I mean, the problem has been that so for what a gamma squeeze does is basically like when dealers or folks that I would be buying options from, if I'm buying an option from a dealer, they're selling it. And if they're selling it, they're short. Depending on the strike and how much time value is left in the option, et cetera, will determine, and where the current price is relative to the price of the option or the strike price of the option, will determine how much like long or short they are gamma. And gamma has been really heavy around the 70K strike since I think like February. And it's danced around a little bit because, options roll off and then you get new expirations and the gamma profile changes. We have been stuck in the belly of the gamma zone a number of times and haven't been able to break out of it. And so I am less confident currently that this is driven by dealers having to delta hedge their positions to avoid a gamma squeeze. I actually think there's just a lot of supply for sale over 70K. And this could be miners, this could be institutions, could be hedge funds, could be people hedging, like who knows. But
S19 is not working anymore. Yeah.
If you look at the chart, like we haven't really been able to hold above 70K consistently since the first time we broke out above it. That suggests there's a lot of resistance there, meaning there's a lot of supply. And so what would cause a potential gamma squeeze is, assume that there's a bunch of gamma at the 70K strike and we rip through 70K and we go to, start marching towards new all-time highs. Then you could potentially see momentum traders come in and say, oh, there's a new all-time high. Now I'm going to trigger to buy Bitcoin and ride the momentum up until the next new all-time high. That could be a scenario where you see a gamma squeeze because it's not getting offered by the market, meaning the market is not selling heavily into the price above 70K.
Dario, see, that's the difference between understanding risk management and not understanding. That you consider all those possibilities. That's right. Awesome. Joe, one of the things that I always like, I tweeted like, I don't know, when it was this weekend, but your newsletter are just a treat for me because they give me personally a very good insight of what's happening with macro. Because if I go and read the FOMC minutes from Jerome, I'm totally lost because I don't know if I have to be a psychologist, but when you start like posting them and just helping us understand that it's just a dance that you have to play. And when you did like this last podcast with Raul Paul, it just becomes more concise. And I remember you mentioning the Shanghai Accords, like the tacit agreement that Janet Yellen did with the Chinese government. And so everything that looks like just a complete chaos, you basically help us view it as, look, it is the dance that is going to happen. And you just need to understand that it's going to happen. And even if they're telling you those are the numbers that are going to happen, that's not the reality. Why is it that you see it so easily, but for us mortals, it's like difficult to understand?
I don't really have a great answer. I mean, look, like I think it was what I was mentioning earlier. I have an insatiable appetite for things that I'm really interested in, and one of those things is macro and understanding the plumbing of the financial system. And so when you kind of really get deep into the plumbing of how the financial system works, there's some, behind the scenes stuff that you can't absolutely confirm or deny happened, but you can kind of connect the dots. And so, I was around in, trading and whatnot in 2016. My trading partner, Chris, was around in 2016. And when you start to see patterns emerge with markets, then you can start to look for the patterns that emerge outside of the markets that are affecting the market. So, for example, the original Shanghai Accord, there was Yellen was head of the Fed at the time, and there was concern that she was going to raise interest rates to 25 basis points from 0, right? And the reason that was a concern is that when the Federal Reserve raises interest rates, it strengthens the dollar and weakens other countries' currencies.
Yeah.
So at the time, Southeast Asian foreign exchange pairs against the US dollar were just getting crushed. from the yuan to the South Korean won to the Hong Kong dollar, the Thai baht, you name it. They were just getting absolutely hammered. And if we were going to raise rates into that, well, that would be really bad for those economies as well as global trade. And so the Shanghai Accord in 2016 was really Yellen going out and meeting a lot of the central bank governors from the various Southeast Asian countries. And again, you can't confirm this, but after that conversation, you had effectively a bottom in the S&P 500. You had a top in the Japanese yen. You had bottoms in Southeast Asian foreign exchange pairs. And, the stock market went on to rip for another 3 years or something, right? Now, correlation is not causation, but it marked pretty much to the day, right? And so that happened. Now, why do we think that's happening again? Well, Southeast Asian foreign exchange pairs have gotten hammered. You see the kind of policy that the Biden administration has applied to China as it relates to trade, somewhat crippling, if not denting their economy. You then see a Federal Reserve interest rate of 5.5%. That is also restrictive for other countries. And then Yellen flies to Southeast Asia again, this time as the head of the U.S. Treasury, right? What has happened since then? You've had major inflows of capital flow into China. You've had Southeast Asian foreign exchange pairs strengthen. You've had the yen bottom against the dollar, which last time it was topping. So that is what it is, an interesting difference between last time. And the stock market has since gone straight up.
Yeah.
So look, could it be just coincidence? Yes. Right? She's definitely not the head of the Fed anymore. She's the head of the Treasury. But the Treasury is the one that's actually stimulating a lot of the growth in the U.S. economy right now through deficit spending, issuing a bunch of debt to, give people jobs and government contracts and all that kind of stuff, right? So we just looked at the pattern and said, all right, probabilistically, what does this look like? Could this be a Shanghai Accord 2.0? We see it as the answer is yes. And if that's true, then we should also see rates come down because we can't have a strong dollar against Southeast foreign exchange pairs. We should see global trade improve. And you saw for the first time in a long time, dollars flowing into China in form of investment dollars. And if these things are going to happen, what does that mean for crypto? It probably means that crypto continues to go higher because you've got rate cuts and you've got a weakening US dollar. Those things historically are great for risk assets. Crypto is the furthest out on the risk curve. Therefore, crypto should actually benefit from that.
So, and this is not financial advice. So even though the print CPI was good, Jerome's speech was just pure posturing because he knows he has to say something, but the underneath the real thing that you just explained is what is happening. Because at the end of the day, it's pretty much you have to monetize that debt. We're at a point where the defense budget is now lesser than what you have to service in the debt, and that is just simply that's it. I was reading I think it's Luke Groman that basically said whenever an empire their debt is bigger than their defense budget, that's when an empire falls.
Yeah, I think I like Luke Groman. I think he's brilliant. But I don't necessarily agree with the notion that the U.S. empire is going to fall. And the reason I suggest that is the U.S. economy is the strongest in the world right now. The U.S. dollar has remained extremely strong for quite some time. The U.S. still has the strongest and biggest military of any country in the world, for better or worse. But more importantly, the way that the interest expense is currently calculated is based on current rates of the debt. And so what can affect the interest expense? The interest rate. Who can affect the interest rate? The Federal Reserve. And so if the Fed were to cut, say, 150 basis points over the course of the next 6 to 12 months, the net interest expense for the U.S. government would drop dramatically. Furthermore, one of the things that people don't recognize is that Janet Yellen can actually go into the open market and buy what are called off-the-run treasuries. So these are treasuries that aren't newly issued in an auction. So assume there was a 10-year treasury bond that was issued 2 years ago, right? So there's 8 years remaining on that treasury bond. Maybe it's trading at 75 cents on the dollar. She can actually go buy that in the open market for 75 cents on the dollar, but retire the debt as if it was 100 cents on the dollar. This is another thing that people don't realize. It's just assets and liabilities on a balance sheet. So if she has a liability at, 100 cents on the dollar and she can buy it for 75, well, guess what? That thing that was a liability at 100 cents on the dollar goes away. So this is another thing that I think it gets lost in like the nonstop doomer media on crypto Twitter or finance FinTwit, et cetera, is that
over intellectualization too. That's
and or just like, I mean, look, like I always joke, like Twitter is player versus player. The game is engagement. So take that into there's a Twitter account called I think the Koblesi letter or something. They have a ton of followers. They constantly post doomer material because it gets a ton of engagement, right? And so I think that's one key important thing to remind yourself of, is that when you're consuming this information, question it. Because are they just doing it for engagement? Are they doing it to spark a conversation? Are they providing real value? Ultimately, I do think that having interest expense that high is not a great thing, and it's largely not sustainable. But that is the moment in time right now. If 6 months from now, the interest rate from the Fed is 100, 150 basis points lower, this conversation is meaningless.
Yeah, irrelevant. I absolutely agree with you. See, Dario, that's what I tell you, that Joe's newsletters are very important, because that's where I started to learn those things, which I totally ignored, 3 years ago. Joe, let's go into something that's more fun. Let's talk memes, because here's my evolution over memes. I bought my first Bitcoin 2013, and I don't like Ethereum don't ask me why, but I never liked it, and I went to Solana. But at some point, I dabbled into Dogecoin. And I kind of like, oh, this is funny. Elon Musk posted, but I've always labeled meme coins as shit coins. But then you happen. And then I started realizing what I was ignoring, which was a very easy formula, which is content plus community equals culture. And I was not aware that it was so important. And I was listening to a podcast from Meow, from Jupiter. I'm like, dude, this for us in Latin America, memes are just like, it's like crack. And I don't know if it's just because and here's an interesting analysis, because some things are made so easy in the US that you discount very quickly what really is valuable for other countries. And for people in Brazil, in Mexico, memes, they just flow, they just happen. It's just so easily relatable. In fact, yesterday we were laughing because we didn't know if your Twitter account was hijacked, not hijacked. Because it happened because it's a DAJT, Donald Trump coin happening. But you basically taken us through this educational point of view, and it all started with Bonk. And then it was Bonk, and then it was Iggy Azalea, Mother. And today I just saw that Iggy is going to sell her cell plans in GameStop. And then I started thinking, well, is everything going to mean? Because we saw what just happened with Roaring Kitty. But then I listened to the earnings call, and this company, Ryan Kine, he has like $3 billion in cash. And I'm like, what is it that people don't get here, and the relevance of meme coins? So why don't you walk us a little bit through Dogecoin, Bonk, Trump, Mother, and also, if you want to get into it, but you had a little bit of beef because someone was kind of like discounting what Iggy was doing, and you have some very cool pictures with Ansem too. But what is it that most people do not get about the culture that is being built around memes?
Yeah, look, so lot to unpack there, so I'll try to start at the top. So there's a guy named Richard Dawkins who was an evolutionary biologist and also turned out to be a staunch atheist, probably from his scientific research around evolution, who kind of more or less, I don't know if he coined the frame mimetic science or really was like the first scientist to focus on it, but mimetic science or the study of mimetic behavior is to you kind of you replicate what you see or what you desire or something to that effect, and it's part of like the evolutionary process for all living creatures on the planet. So that's like where we start, right? Way up high. And so you can see mimetic behavior, like from when you have children, like how do children learn Spanish in Colombia? Well, they mimic what they hear from their parents, right? Yep. Or their friends or their, whatever. So you're mirroring or mimetically sort of engaging with learning how to speak a language. And then it's, some of the customary ways of greeting people in Colombia might be different than they are in California, for example, right? That is another form of mimetic behavior that is learned and kind of transcends amongst human beings globally. And there's certainly local things and probably some more universal things. Well, what does that have to do with the internet? Well, the internet isn't really a place, right? Even though we say we go on the internet or, I'm surfing the internet, right? It's not a place like Colombia or California. It is something else. And it's an environment. It's an experience, something to that effect. And so what ends up happening on the internet is because it's not a physical place, the way that information propagates throughout the internet is very unique to the internet, right? So, in the early days of like, I guess, Web 2, this is like around when YouTube first kind of came on the scene. That was the first time we had viral videos. So, depending on how old your audience is, like viral videos started pretty much on YouTube, more or less. And why were they called viral? Because they spread like a virus over the internet. You can't have a video in Colombia on your, TV or something all of a sudden propagate all around the world if it's not on the internet. It's not possible. So for the first time ever, we had the ability for content to be virally spread throughout the internet in a rapid pace. And it was the term meme got coined because people would then share the content and someone would consume it and then they would share the same thing, which is a form of mimetic behavior. However, when when YouTube first allowed these kind of these viral moments started to happen, there was no way to monetize them. There was no way to really participate beyond sharing it, which is what everybody did for the longest time. And so that changed when meme coins came about. Dogecoin initially was more or less a fork of Bitcoin, not technically, but we won't get into the details. They basically forked a proof of work chain to just make a fun of Bitcoin. Like that's literally, it was a joke. But then everybody was in on the joke and they shared the joke through Dogecoin, right? The actual token. So the mimetic behavior, instead of sharing a viral video, was sending people Dogecoin all around the world or whatever it was, right? Everybody was in on the joke. Well, that thing became extremely valuable in the last cycle such that it outperformed almost all of the VC intellectually, supported investments. Like Dogecoin was like number 6 top by market cap at the end of 2021. It does nothing. It's a joke, right? You should pay attention to that if you're an investor or a trader, because even if you don't, even if you have your belief that, well, this needs to have real use cases or this should have some fundamental value, it's like your job is to make money. And if this thing outperformed all of your VC investments, you should probably pay attention to it, right? And so from there was the Dogecoin killer, which is Shiba Inu on Ethereum. There's a bunch of lore and reasons around why that thing exploded. Of course, Elon Musk is a big fan of Dogecoin, and it's one of the reasons why it's maintained like a multi-billion-dollar market cap, because people are assuming at some point he's going to enable Dogecoin on Twitter or something to that effect. Yep. And that leads us to Bonk. And so my perspective on Bonk was in late 2023, Solana hadn't really had a big breakout meme coin. You had Dogecoin, which was more or less associated with Bitcoin because it was a fork of proof of work. You had Shiba Inu, which was on Ethereum. You didn't really have a dog coin that really ran to multi-billion-dollar market cap on Solana. And so when I looked at all the on-chain forensics and analytics, I saw a ton of stable coins coming into Solana in October. and the price of Solana was starting to get to a point where it was going to reach a breakout level, which was basically retracing when the FTX implosion happened and really crushed Solana's price. So I put all these things together and I said, if people are going to be moving money on chain, stable coins to buy stuff and do stuff on Solana, they're probably going to buy a meme coin. Well, what's the best meme coin on Solana at the time? It was Bonk, and it was a $28 million market cap. And so one of the things, the reason my fund is named Asymmetric is I'm constantly seeking asymmetry in trade opportunities and investment opportunities. Well, if Dogecoin got to an $85 billion market cap in 2021 and Shiba Inu got to a $45 billion market cap in 2021, well, Bonk is trading at a $28 million market cap. So 100x from here is $2.8 billion market cap, right? Like 1,000x would be $28 billion market cap, not even the peak of Shiba Inu. So as an investor and a trader, I look at this and go, I don't care about the fundamental value or lack thereof. Look at this trade opportunity. You have the ability to make 100 or 1,000x, and it won't even be the top of what Shiba Inu got to, let alone Dogecoin. You put that trade on all day long. And so we were very fortunate to get very early to Bonk. We still own a large piece of it because we believe that there's continued upside with the Bonk team and what they've been doing and how they've generated real products with real revenue. And the last thing I'll mention about meme coins as it relates to where we are today is, Solana's run in Q4 and even at the beginning of this year, I think was a wake-up call to a lot of people to realize that Solana is the chain for retail. Solana is the chain for culture. Like you literally cannot do what happens on Solana on another chain, period. End of story. And I mean L1s. I'm not going to get into this bullshit debate about, oh, well, you can do it on a layer 2. And it's like, no, because then you got to bridge and then you got to have all this. Nope. Layer 1, no one can do it. Right. Yeah. And I think what's fascinating about like the thing with Iggy Azalea. So I was at dinner with her last week in New York. And I felt so validated because she said, yeah, I've been a supporter of Solana for a long time. It's fast and cheap. Like, duh, why wouldn't everybody use this? And I'm like, exactly. But in the crypto realm, you have so many VCs and so many people that have invested in Ethereum that they have bag holder bias. They can't see what is actually happening in front of them. And what's happening is, hey, that thing that you made a bunch of money on last cycle that you're really committed to, yeah, that's not working anymore, right? The BlackBerry made a bunch of money. Research in Motion was a tens of billions of dollar market cap company at one point. But there was a better product. It's called the iPhone, right? At some point, you either have to, I always say never be married to a trade. I'm not even married to Solana as a trade, right? And I'm a huge Solana bull. Never be married to a trade. If you can't actually see what's happening in front of you with respect to the changes in your fundamental thesis of your investments, you're going to lose money or you're going to underperform.
And those people that over-intellectualize it, the only thing they need to see is, for example, Dario being paid in USDC on Solana, us going to a lunch next Thursday, all Colombians, they don't have MetaMask, they have Phantom Wallet, and they're all like, okay, I'll pay you 100, I'll pay you 50, and it's boom, happening. Because They all got it easy, it's simple, and it's the same thing that Iggy Azalea said. That's it.
That's right. And look, I mean, with respect to what Iggy's doing, like, I think a lot of people see celebrities entering crypto and immediately think it's a grift, right? That they're coming in to scam or, make a quick buck or whatever. And what I learned from Iggy is the story of how the Mother token came to be. This was not a grift. This was actually a reaction to a scammer that was trying to actually launch an Iggy token, the same scammer that rugged Caitlyn Jenner for $6.5 million. This guy's Neil. She told him, I'm not interested in working with you. And he decided to go create a pre-sale for the Iggy token. And she realized, I can't have that happen because that will affect my personal brand. I have to get out in front of him and actually launch my own token. So she launched it. She wasn't planning on launching this. It wasn't like part of their strategy with the mobile phone service or Dream Vault. It wasn't. It was a reaction to a scammer that was about to really tarnish her personal brand that she didn't want to have to deal with. And so overnight, they came up with the concept of Mother. They launched the token on pump.fun. And the thing took off, right?
But that by itself is fascinating because here comes a scammer And Solana is so easy that they can just cut this camera like we'll do it first. That's actually by itself is the story. Solana is so much easier that they can do it by themselves. That is amazing.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I mean, I think that, I was on a podcast. I think I do so many of these now, I forgot which one, but I was on a podcast the other day, or no, I was on a panel in Consensus talking about meme coins. And one of the things that is truly only possible on Solana is something like Pump.Fun, where you have effectively what's called like a no-code solution for creating meme coins, right? Like anybody can do it. And 12, 13 years ago, the only people that could build like iPhone apps were iPhone developers. Well, now you have no-code solutions where you can click a few buttons and drag some stuff around and you can get an iPhone app. Well, that's basically what happened with meme coins, right? Like before, you actually had to be a Solana developer and understand how to mint a token and create the liquidity pool and like all that kind of stuff, right? Not anymore. No code. Just press a few buttons on Pump.Fun and you've got a meme coin. And so I know a lot of people are, I've seen a lot of folks writing, blog posts and think pieces about how terrible meme coins are and this and that. And it's like, look, this is a permissionless network. You're going to end up with people doing whatever the hell they want. And if this network can be accessible by normies, retail, celebrities, pop culture icons, guess what? That's going to happen.
Yeah, they cannot domesticate culture because it's the antithesis of what culture is. You cannot domesticate it. It's like when rap music started happening, and even reggaeton, it was just the breakup of sentiment and people listening to other music. So if that's what they want them to happen, it's even great. Now, I'm going to ask you two more questions because the other thing that's been fascinating, even if it's Trump doing a token, which we don't know if it's true or if it's not, or just the shift from like, I don't know, what was it like? When was the fundraiser for Trump when somebody asked him, so all crypto companies going out of the state?
Like a month or a month and a half ago. Yeah.
And then immediately shift. No, everybody was caught off guard with the Ethereum approval. And so it's easy because most politicians, they're chasing the opinion of people that are telling, look, our opinion is this. And when you have 50 to 70 million voters, then the base starts to shift. And so that to me by itself is fascinating. And I think one of the most important things that is happening, and that's why I'm so bullish on the environment, is like never in our lives did we expect it that 4 years ago that like, okay, Trump is going to launch a meme, or maybe it's an FT, or like people are going to donate to Biden. Is it really happening that fast, that shift in politics where like, okay, this thing is here to stay?
Yeah, I mean, I can only speak for U.S. politics, but I can assure you that the job of a politician in the United States is to stay in office or get elected. And they'll do or say anything they have to do or say to get elected or stay in office. And so what's important for the tone shift recently is less about Trump and more about the Biden administration. So the Biden administration has clearly been anti-crypto. They have instituted policies directly and indirectly that make it incredibly difficult for American businesses, entrepreneurs, crypto investors, publicly traded companies to do anything with crypto in the United States. That is a fact. That is not conjecture. For them to all of a sudden like 180 on all of that is remarkable. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that Trump's reelection team realized after that guy asked the question at that fundraiser that the amount of activity that Trump received online, on Twitter and elsewhere was enormous. And they were like, oh, we have a really like active base of people that we probably haven't tapped into that are very vocal and very loud and very serious about crypto. And so then they leaned into it. He was doing speeches of talking about like the importance of retaining the right to self-custody and freeing Ross Ulbricht, the founder of Silk Road, and like things that were just unbelievable to hear from a presidential candidate and a former president that was just convicted of 34 felonies, right? The Biden administration had to have seen this because he was able to raise a lot of money, and the interest shifted towards Trump over this issue. That really is a turning point for crypto, certainly in the United States. And because the United States presidential election is probably the most important election globally every 4 years, that's an international topic now. Now, other countries like Japan and France and UK and South Korea and even Hong Kong, et cetera, have been actively pushing for adoption, integration, regulation of crypto and digital assets. The United States has been way behind in this. And so for them to see this gravitation towards the Trump reelection team, as well as the fundraising that comes from it, that's what matters in Washington, D.C. is the money. And so if Trump can raise a ton of money from the crypto community, which he has and he can, let alone big tech, right? So I kind of wrote about this in our last piece. Silicon Valley stalwarts, billionaires, founders of PayPal, and these guys that have been around for a long time that historically have been Democrats are throwing fundraisers for Trump because
you saw David Sachs, Chamath,
because the current administration is anti-tech, anti-innovation. At least that's their perspective, and I would agree with that, right? Like the focus on regulation of artificial intelligence and pushing things to be closed source, and OpenAI adding a member of the NSA to their board of directors. This is stuff that will enable OpenAI to be a very valuable business. It's called regulatory capture, but it is net negative for innovation in the United States. And it's not just AI, it's blockchain and crypto as well. And so you have a lot of folks that are looking at the Biden administration and saying, you're anti-innovation, you're anti-entrepreneurial, you're anti-crypto, you're anti-AI, whatever it is. I don't even care if I like Trump or not. It's not Biden. And that is a major problem for the Biden administration to get reelected. And that is why you now see Biden accepting crypto for donations, which is ironic because his entire administration has made it next to impossible for you to use crypto. Right?
Everything.
And so I think the long story short here is that the major sea change event in the political landscape as it relates to crypto is critically important for the future of crypto in the United States, which ultimately affects the rest of the world. I actually don't think it matters who wins the election. What matters is that crypto is a major issue amongst voters. And there's a lot of research out there to suggest that a third of the electorate in the United States cares about what their president thinks of crypto, should be aware of it, these types of things. That's a material number. And the United States presidential elections tend to come down to a few percentage points. We're a pretty, polarized country as it relates to the two-party system that we have. And so by having the ability for something like crypto to swing the vote one way or the other, both candidates have to have a strategy.
Dude, it's just amazing. Just in 11 months, you were explaining to us why Elizabeth Warren had such a resonance with the Twitter community. And look at the sentiment right now. It's only been 11 months. And look at the dramatic, this is a tectonic shift. Okay, last question, because I know you have to go and you're doing a bunch of things and you got to look at the market. One of the followers that I always share with my chat is Mert. But the problem with Mert is that whenever he tweets, I understand probably 15% of all the technical stuff that is happening there. But the only thing that I can conclude is that the progress of what is currently happening with Solana is bigger than ever. And so why don't you tell us about 2 or 3 things, and maybe you can throw Fire Dancer there, but like 2 or 3 things that are just like, holy shit, this is actually happening. Because I saw you tweet this thing about, I'm probably babbling here because I don't know the words, but this new interface of gaming that just makes things super fast, and then you don't need layer 2s because it's all happening there. 2 or 3 things that have just recently amazed you that are actually happening as technical upgrades on Solana that just make us more confident of the current bet that we currently have.
Yeah, I mean, where do I start? So I think I'll start with like, look, I've been a huge proponent of Solana for 5 years now, and it starts with the first principles approach they have of scaling a blockchain, which is, you know, parallelization at its basic understanding. And that just seemed super obvious to me that, like, of course you have to have a parallelized approach to scaling a blockchain. It as a technologist, it seems obvious. That being said, well, how do you ensure that Solana can actually scale to the load that we need for 1 billion users or whatever, right? The only way to do that is to get a crazy amount of activity on the chain, to identify bugs in the code, so that we can then fix those bugs and then scale further up, right? Like, so in March, late March, when the meme coin activity was going crazy, there was a significant amount of activity on the chain. And a lot of media outlets covered this incorrectly, suggesting that 75% of all transactions were failing. It's actually not true. What was actually happening was, like, say you were going to go do a swap on Jupiter, and when you go to submit the transaction, the slippage was outside of what you set it. Well, that is a failed transaction because it should be. It shouldn't execute if it's outside the bounds of, like, your slippage, right? However, in that state of heightened activity, there were some realizations around bugs that had been introduced or that were observable at that point because you had so much activity. Since then, there have been improvements to the validator clients such that those bugs are largely squashed. This is great. Like, you know, I always tell people, like, Solana's going to have reliability issues until it doesn't. And that's okay, because you can't actually create a blockchain that operates at NASDAQ speed, you know, synchronizing global state at the speed of light, without actually having these types of issues. It's just not possible, right? And so, I mean, look, the NASDAQ, the NYSE a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, had an outage and a major issue with pricing, right? Like, the notion that software, because it's been running for so long, is bulletproof is complete nonsense. And so what I try to educate people on is that if you look at the vision of Anatoly and what he's looking to do with Solana, it's not like an overnight success. You have a lot of steps along the way to actually get to that end goal. Is the end goal even achievable? Well, we won't know until we start to get, 10,000 TPS per second, crazy amounts of activity, thousands and thousands of validators trying to sync global state, all of these things, right? On a more technical level, I wrote about this back in February. There's a new thing that has come out that I don't think the surface of this has barely been scratched, and it's called token extensions. Yeah. And so most recently, a couple weeks ago, PayPal announced that they're going to be launching their stablecoin on Solana using token extensions. And token extensions, at a minimum, are basically like, you can add a bunch of new functionality to an SPL token. And so all the tokens on Solana are SPL tokens. The beauty of this is that these token extensions enable enterprise application development. See PayPal, for example. PayPal now says, hey, we can use a permissionless network like Solana, but still do the things that we need to do to remain compliant and secure as an enterprise. It's not possible on any other chain. Sorry, it doesn't work. And it doesn't work at scale, right? And so this is, I think, an area that is like mispriced in Solana about how big this can actually be. Because as someone who, ran an open source company for a massive open source project, the enterprise is the final boss for open source. The second that an enterprise starts adopting, an open source technology like Node.js in my case, or Solana currently, it's not going away, because these organizations can't just rip it out and replace it with something else. And in fact, now they have to hire Solana developers at PayPal, right? Which means developers, their paycheck requires them to know Solana. That also means other developers that want to work at PayPal, hey, if I learn Solana, I can go work at PayPal. It creates this virtuous feedback loop. And I think that is, enterprise applications are not sexy. It's not your Iggy Azaleas of the world, or meme coins where people make $3 million off of $5,000 or something. You're not going to see, salacious headlines around enterprise application development. But enterprise application development with an open source technology is one of the most powerful tailwinds for an open source technology and its long-term viability.
Joe, you just made me more bullish. I read the token on your market update, but I never thought it as the impact that you're currently describing. You just made me more bullish, and I think that you and all of our friends are just going to be more bullish on Solana. Well, I think that's been enough for today. Any alpha that you want to share, because this has been a banger of an episode, and we're going to share it next week because we're releasing it as the 100th episode, not this Thursday, but this has just been amazing, Joe. I wish we could definitely have you again in 11, 12 months, and hopefully we'll see. You know how many friends of ours from the chat are going to Breakpoint? At least 6 or 7 have already their tickets. So it's going to be a bunch of people that follow us at 10 a.m. Pro, and probably a few more will add on. So
I will leave you with this alpha that Asymmetric is going to be throwing a huge party with a heavy focus on culture. So right. at Breakpoint. So stay tuned for that.
We like culture, man. So we're definitely into it. You'll see us there then. All right, awesome. Joe. Thanks a lot, man. Much appreciated, and we'll share this soon.
Thank you.
It was amazing, Joe. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Joe, I'll see you tomorrow too, man, because we have another call.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay, great.
Yo me voy a tener que volver a ver todo el video.
Claro.
Porque hubo unas cosas cuando empezó el Delta Hedge y yo digo, marica, weón.
¿Qué es esa mierda?
¿Qué es esa mierda? No entiendo cómo así. Pero todo, o sea, yo ya tenía como un par de preguntas estructuradas, que yo creo que para nadie me preparo, pero para este man sí, porque cuando se me va por ese
tubo,
por esa esquina de ese tubo de conocimiento, dijo, pucha, sí me faltan aprender cosas. Y por eso es que me gustan pues tanto. Y lo que les decía, el man pues nos tiene como alguna especie de cariño muy extraño porque vivió 6 meses en Medellín.
Sí,
entonces nos para bolas y le escribimos. El man no me pregunta, ¿la entrevista va a ser en español, en inglés? No, sí, hágale, que ustedes son de Medellín y lo saca. Pero mira los 4 elementos. Entonces te diste cuenta, mira, todo lo que sabe de macro, todo lo que sabe de código, todo lo que sabe de cultura. Se me había olvidado, yo no te había contado, que es que el man había sido DJ, tenía una marca de ropa. O sea, y todo lo que sabe de análisis técnico. No, es una berraquera.
Interesante eso de DJ, hombre. Por eso lo ve uno como tan pendiente de Bonk y haciendo tanta cosa con Bonk. Pues sí lo ve venir. Interesante. Muy chévere.
¿Qué pregunta creíste que nos quedó faltando hacerle al hombre?
No. Muy interesante también lo que explicó de estas elecciones en Estados Unidos, lo que está pasando, porque a veces uno lo ve, uno lo percibe, pero como no está en la política de Estados Unidos, lo que es increíble es cómo cada vez más el simple hecho de las elecciones en Estados Unidos tienen un impacto global. Siempre lo han tenido, pero yo siento que ahora es mucho más agresivo, muchísimo más agresivo. Entonces, muy interesante eso que está empezando a ocurrir. Muy.
No, y aprende uno mucho. Lo único que este es el episodio número 100, pero tenemos uno antes. No sé qué vos me digas que lo que publiquemos antes. No sé, ¿cuál te parece más?
No, este es el 100.
Sí, este es el 100, pero bueno. Entonces le toca esperar una semana. Bueno, eso era. Nos quedó muy bueno.
Nada más.
Lo que podríamos hacer es publicarlo, pero dejarlo deslistado y empezarlo a compartir internamente para que la gente que sea más nerd lo vaya viendo. ¿Qué decís?
Gracias.
Bueno, después lo hablamos.
Voy a parar.
Listo.